You mentioned a few things that, especially like the new age things of like channeling and stuff. I've never heard that that's not something you should do. And it's funny because I actually just bought a book to kind of like learn more about it to start channeling. So it's different perceptions.
Well,
Are interesting to know.
there's two different forms of that exploration. There's channeling,
Hmm.
and then there's data streaming. We can call it that. I mean, people call it different terms, but it's called data streaming. So, for instance, this is how I experience data streaming. I'll literally feel like a file download almost. Like you would download a file or upload a file onto the internet or whatever. I'll literally feel like almost like a file download on a certain topic. I'll literally like almost see the title. And it literally, for me, what I experience it as is a higher aspect of my anatomy or my template, like you could call it the higher self or whatever, is giving me this information. So I take that template and I translate it and I write it down or I speak it.
Hmm.
That's how I experience these pockets of information. It's kind of like what we did today. You give me a question or a topic, and then I download it. Now some of it's coming from my body's recollection and memory, but there are specific times where I feel like there's just this transmission or download, and then boom, I translate it and it's there. But that's coming from, as much as I know and the work that I've done, it's coming from an aspect of my own template and my own higher self, which we could say is connected to the all, and everything's connected to the all. But there's a very intimate, personal relationship with that, where I'm not losing consciousness in any way. Nothing is coming in my body or taking me over. I'm just moving with that,
Okay.
right? So that's important. Channeling is where there's an invitation or there's a forced entry, which is actually possession, of a being coming into the body and taking over the template and then speaking through the body, right?
Mm.
So, okay, I'm not going to say that every channeling is malevolent, like a negative orientation, but what I will say is that all the trend of what I've seen from channelers who've done it for a long period of time is they end up with really challenging health issues later down the road, because the energy they're taking in is not their own and is not correct for their template, and it's overpowering their template,
Mhm.
and that's when inevitably they face a lot of challenges because they've damaged their DNA, in a pretty profound way, right?
Yeah.
So that's the core difference. Now, even like calling in a being and conversing or interacting with that being, that can be a form of like channeling, but it's safer, we could say, because you're not losing consciousness and there's more of a, it's like a person to person communication,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, I mean, the core of it is like, I could say these things, but people are never gonna believe it until they experience the bliss of themselves. Because when you feel the bliss of yourself, you're not gonna want anything else in you.
Hmm.
You're not gonna want to eat certain food. You're not gonna want to have that type of conversation. You're not gonna want to do all these things because you feel what you feel like, which is the loving compassion of God source, right? So you're not gonna want to have channel like that kind of stuff, right? But until that's consistent, that's where those desires I found in myself when I was doing all that, that's where it came from,
Hmm.
right? Or with psychedelics, it was just forced, where I'd have a being like literally come in me, and I'm like now speaking like it, and I'm like, okay, well, this is fun because I never experienced it before, but I didn't know if it was good or if it was good right for me, or you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh, okay, I guess you're here now.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And this is coming like it's come from my experience, but it's coming from beings that I really respect, and people
Mhm.
that I really trust in, and yeah, they've shared some powerful things, and it just reiterated what I had observed from seeing other channelers and things over time. That yeah, a lot of times say really nice things, and sure, I can be thankful of that. Like, wow, that's such a beautiful teaching. But do I want to be channeling that stuff? No. Like, I don't
Okay.
want that. I don't want no being coming in me. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what it is. It's not saying like what they're saying is not correct. But we have to question, like, well, why are they doing that? Because in my understanding of higher beings in the universe, the most benevolent ones are going to stay the most out of your life. You know,
Okay.
they're going to stay the most, they're going to help you, protect you, whatever, in ways they feel are correct, but they're not going to break the laws of free will, or they're not going to get involved with you in too much of an intrusive way.
Mm,
And that's my litmus test anytime. If I feel like I don't have beings come to me usually unannounced anymore, but if it happens, that's my litmus test, right?
okay.
So yeah.
That's interesting. Because I've been really interested in connecting with my guides. And
Mm.
so it's interesting to know that information.
Well, one thing that I learned from my friend, I don't, were you on the call with Bhavik when I had Bhavik on?
No.
So he's a really good friend of mine. He's very to himself. He's not public really with a lot of his stuff, but he's, in my view, one of the most advanced psychics I've come to know. And I, for years, and I still do at times, check in with him. Like, you know, he checks in. He's very clear in his ability to check in with guides. Now it's become more of a learning. He's a teacher to me because he's taught me how to check in on my own. But what I've learned from him and what I've learned within my own journey is that our guides are just emanations of our own consciousness. So they're aspects of our higher self that are just taking up different forms, but they're all a part of our same kind of soul family, if you will, or
Mhm.
incarnate self. Because at the different layers of our higher self, oversoul, avatar self, and rishi self, there's basically it comes in multiples of 12 pretty much, of aspects of us that are incarnate in different ways, different places in the universe. But it's like that's our true soul family. It's basically us separated into different subforms of higher versions of us.
Mhm.
So it's kind of complex, but that's as simple as I'll make it for now. So when we speak to the idea of guides, we're basically connecting to these aspects of ourselves, or that would be at least the most refined process of that, right? So that is really not so much as far as just like coming to tune into our intuition, really starting to feel into the different ways in which we receive messaging, and whether certain messaging may feel intrusive or whether it may feel like correct, like that feels right, you know. And a lot of it is kind of like a trial and error process. That's how it's been for me. Like, you know, asking a question, feeling into what I truly feel, like really being honest with myself. And then I could say like, oh, I'm asking my guides, but really I'm just asking myself, right?
Okay.
So it still works the same, but it's just it's that process of listening and then acting on the thing, you know, and then you'll see like what the results are, and you'll kind of see like, oh, but I was kind of feeling like this was actually it and I didn't listen, you
Mhm.
know. So as you can kind of start to like do that almost like in your own self study, then you start to refine that, the listening, where you're like, okay, I remember that from last time, it kind of felt like that, but it was in the distance, so I can tune to that more next time. And then you keep going with that, and it keeps to, you know, deepen. And you know, it may be different for you. You may get visions or more auditory, right? Like sometimes I'll get direct auditory, like from a higher aspect of self that will be like very clear, you know. So as we get clear, that connection becomes clear, and then we have more of a line of communication, um, that'll be there, you know.
Okay. Cool.